land on which we meet has been here from time immemorial, and people, First Nations, have inhabited the land from time immemorial. We thank the Chinatan, also called the Yadawandaron, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee peoples who lived here when the settlers arrived and who share this land with us. May we together learn to care for and respect each other, our flora and fauna, and the land we inhabit together. Are there any, excuse me, disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Approval of the previous minutes. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at them? Not moved by Eric, seconded by Linda. All those in favor? That looks like it's carried. Thank you.
Could I just mention a couple
Yes,
of small,
Sebastian, yes.
small changes?
Sure.
Okay, just for
Stacey,
clarification. On page 5 of the document, near the bottom, it has second last point here, near wells PW5 and PW5 on the southwest side of the site. I think you mean PW4 and PW5 on the southwest side. Just for clarification, Stacey.
Okay, I can write that one. So it would be, do you want to redo your vote that they would be adopted as amended?
As amended by Sebastian, do you have more than that?
Just a couple of small ones.
Yeah.
Okay. On page 8 of the document, let's see, roughly in the middle here, it says a point here, current data relies solely on well OW14, which is far removed from the area, making it insufficient, blah, blah, blah. Actually, OW14 is actually right in the gap area, so it's not far removed at all. So just a point of clarification. And finally, on page 9, there's a reference to RP5. I think you actually mean RPE5. That's actually the very first point here. Yeah, very top of the page of page 9. Past site visits discussed overflow risks from RP5, noting blah blah blah. Should be RPE5. Okay, sorry, but that's the pedantic in me coming out. Okay.
Does everyone agree with those questions?
So adopted as amended then, and saying nods. Okay. Thank you. We have no delegations this evening, so we'll start with updates from the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. Jason. The first thing is LANXESS proposed amendments to the ECA biomonitoring requirements.
Yes, so we have that proposal. We've completed the review of that biomonitoring proposal, which is to replace the clam study under the ECA with the fish tissue testing study. We will be issuing formal comments back to LANXESS next week. Basically, overall, the ministry is in favor of the proposed biomonitoring approach. A replacement for the clam study. We'll be requesting a few modifications to the proposed methodologies and frequency back to LANXESS, and then for LANXESS as next steps will be finalizing that plan to issue as a final work plan back to the ministry, and in accordance with the ECA. It'll require West Central Region Director Lubna Hussain to accept and sign off on this technical change to the ECA for the biomonitoring. So we'll be issuing that response to LANXESS for next week.
Will TRAC be able to see those comments, or will we just see the final?
Yeah, the response to LANXESS will be also shared with TRAC.
Okay, great.
Any questions? Comments? Otherwise?
No.
Thanks, Jason. The next two are the off-site groundwater pumping study and proposed groundwater treatment bench scale study. I understand that's related to a work plan that we maybe haven't seen, but you can bring us up to date on.
I don't know. Hadley, was that the offsite groundwater pumping study shared with TRAC? I don't know that.
I can't recall either.
Okay.
I'm sorry, we can, I can share it for sure. I mean, we don't have approval yet. We have some comments back and forth. We're addressing your latest round, and I think it should go out tonight, probably tomorrow.
Yeah,
Okay.
like, I guess if we can just have an opportunity to see, what is being proposed specifically, it would be helpful.
Didn't we present on it that a few months ago, like at one of them, that the interior wells would be shut down, not
Yeah.
7?
Yeah, I guess we just would like to see like the kind of final proposed
And
work
diagram.
plan and,
Diagram,
yeah, diagram and,
timing,
Yeah.
frequency.
Okay.
So are these going to be done this summer?
With luck, yes. Yep, that's the goal.
Okay. Did you have anything else?
no, just that I'm fairly certain that we've only seen the presentation of what was intended to be proposed, but no documentation, no written work plan or anything like that, so just
Okay.
being able to see that would be helpful.
Yep, we can get you that. And also, there's the bench scale study too. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
been shared.
No, it hasn't.
So this is to get us ready for the next control order. Is that right?
Yep. hmm
So it's important to get it done so we can move forward on that.
It's data collection to support what we'll do for the next consent order, right, control order. To help us look at the science, maybe look at it a little differently, see if there's a different alternative for the long-term cleanup of the aquifer.
And often those are specific times that you want to do them, right? So I'm not sure if this is, I know we've had some studies in the past that were very specific to the time of year when you could do them to get the data that you needed. So I just want to make sure that it happens so that we can move forward with this in a timely fashion.
Agreed. That's my goal as well. Yep.
Yeah, so the ministry has completed its review of the proposed offsite groundwater pumping study. We had a few comments with respect to just clarifying the contingency planning aspect of the work plan. Aside from that, pretty minor. So once we see that final pumping study, basically, in accordance with the ECA requirements and conditions, this will require West Central Region Director sign off on. So we can arrange to have that pretty quickly once we see the final product.
Yeah, based on all of our communications, we still think we'll be able to get it done this summer. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
We're not anticipating any roadblocks along the way.
No, not for these. No.
Okay, Sebastian, did you have your hand
I
up?
think the answer, my questions have been answered, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. LANXESS then, Hadley, I guess that's you.
Yep, and I think, let me make sure I have the agenda right. I think we start with Joe's presentation. Is that right? Oh, no. Well, we talked about the site visit, obviously postponed. I don't think we could have picked a worse day, right? We didn't know, but I was there and I've never seen snow fall down so fast. Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
quite the day, for sure.
Yeah.
I think Stacy's putting out a doodle poll and she's asking for us to respond by the 16th. Is that right, Stacy?
Yes, by next Wednesday, if you could.
So if you can make sure you complete that by next Wednesday, she'll find a date for us.
Yep. We were trying to get it so early so there wouldn't be vegetation to really see the gap area. The vegetation will be up by the time we get out there. So it'll be a little harder, and it also adds ticks and other fun things like poison ivy, different biological health and safety concerns. But at least we should still be able to see something.
Eric,
Can I ask a question about one back at 513?
Yeah.
Jason, if I heard correctly, you said you were in the process of approving the offsite groundwater pumping study, but I didn't hear you
Correct.
talk about the status of the groundwater treatment bench scale study. Is that on
yeah.
the same line, or?
I'd like to get that completed for the month of April. So
Were the review completed and Hadley again for summer implementation, or what's the time period for that one?
Yes, they're both the summer.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And also the study in the river too, with the fish monitoring. So I don't know what Jason's comments are yet. It sounds like there's something on the frequency, but that's also a summer event. So I think all of them should still be able to happen. I don't see any stoppers on those three.
Annual monitoring report. Somebody, did you want to introduce that at all, Tiffany, or?
I think Hadley can probably introduce it, but this is probably quite familiar with those of you who have seen Joe Ricker's presentation from previous years. So we asked, because it has been quite useful to visualize the information, so we asked for him to be able to present the information in the 2024 annual monitoring report.
Yep, absolutely. The annual monitoring report's a long submittal of text, but it also then has Joe's presentation embedded in it. And I think, Stacy, I don't know if you can run it as a PowerPoint so Joe can walk everyone through it. That's really the most dynamic way to do it.
Can I share my screen and do this?
Oh, there we go.
That would be the easier way for me, at least.
Perfect.
Jason
Yeah.
says yes.
Yes, you should be able to, just let me check if you're having.
And I think everybody knows Joe. Do we need to do an introduction or?
Yeah,
I can
You
give
can introduce yourself. Okay, yeah, thanks.
it says that I'm trying to share my screen. I don't know if it's going to let me or not. Yeah, I'm Joe Ricker. So good to see everybody again, virtually at least. Yeah, we've been doing this for quite a few years now. Started back in 2015 timeframe, quite a while ago for the first time we did it. But it's been really good. Just been updating it almost annually since then. And I'm an engineer by training. Doing hydrogeology mostly is what I do. Plume analytics, groundwater data analytics is a lot of my practice, and doing it for a long time. Lots of plumes, lots of sites we've looked at, and this is one of my, I guess, favorite ones from the standpoint that it's it's a good story. I really like presenting this one because of that. It is, I think, shows a really good progress, and I know I'm foreshadowing here, but you guys have all seen it. So, but I can certainly present it. Hopefully, I can share my screen. Okay, there we go. It's letting me do it now. All right.
Should be able
Yep.
to.
Okay, now it's let. I think.
Yeah, we're
Says,
good.
can you guys see it? Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, just a minute, Sebastian.
So could I just ask you, the company that put this together was at WSP.
Yes.
It signed, the head of the WSP signed it, but you also signed it as well. What is your relationship with WSP?
That's my employer. That's who I work for.
Okay.
I work for WSP. Is that?
Oh, okay. I thought you were independent, that's all.
No. Yeah. So when we started doing this, I worked for a company called EarthCon Consultants, and we were a small assessment remediation company, and we were just like 100 people. So we were pretty small. And that's when I started working with Ramin, years ago, doing this analysis. But we were acquired in 2021 by WSP. So I am fully employed by WSP at this point.
Thank you. Great.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, I will, hopefully you guys can see the screen okay then, right? And I will get started on it. Okay, so what we're doing is what we've been doing for some years now is looking at really two constituents, NDMA and chlorobenzene, just in the upper municipal aquifer and then the lower municipal aquifer, just the two zones. And so what I'll do is I'll walk through these. I know most people have seen it. I'll walk through it a little bit. If you have any questions, feel free to certainly say, hey, Joe, stop, I have a question. But what I'll do is click on these buttons. It's an interactive presentation here. So if I click on NDMA, it's going to drop into, you know, what we call a plume map or ISO concentration map of data. And just to point out a couple of things here, you guys, the data at the top, 1993. So we're plotting data kind of like a weather map, just you know, just plots you know, lines of equal concentration on this figure. And then we're using what's called the Richter method. That is a method I developed a long time ago. It's published, peer reviewed, and all that. But it's a way of looking at plume behavior, ways of understanding how a plume is behaving in the subsurface. And so we measure different metrics within the plume, and those are tabulated over here. So the areal extent in hectares, and then the average concentration, which is a spatial integration over this whole plume domain. Then we combine those two metrics to come up with a mass estimate or a mass indicator in kilograms. So those three metrics are here. We also calculate the center of mass, the yellow cross in the middle, and that is it's a center of concentrations, and it's a mathematical center. So it can sometimes give an indication of plume stability. So our goal here, my sole goal in this entire project team, is understanding, you know, plume stability, plume behavior, you know, as a result of remedial actions that have occurred at the site. You know, obviously there's team members on here that are much smarter and much more knowledge than me on this particular site. I can tell you how the plumes are behaving though. That's the main goal that I'm doing. So we do this for every event where we have data. So this is 1993. You see it's about 80 kilograms, and that's an estimate of the dissolved NDMA mass. And so when I play the video here, we're going to look at each of the events. So it's an empirical evaluation of actual data for each of the years, you know, all the way through 2024. Now, a couple of things I want to point out, and I've done this before, hopefully it makes sense. When I back it up, you see some different colors on there. And all that means is I've backed it up here several years, and I'm going to play it forward again. You'll notice some wells turn orange, and we call that a hanging well. And what that means is that well stops being sampled, or we no longer have data for it. So what we do in our analysis is we turn it orange to let the viewers see that, hey, there was a well there. We lost data from it, so we're just kind of like a ghost or a shadow. You know, the plume well is there, but we just don't have data anymore. So indicating that it's, so here's some two wells that are hanging out here, meaning we no longer have data for those wells. And so that's what that indicates. One thing I didn't mention, I should have mentioned this earlier. We decided years ago to exclude all of the on-site areas. These characteristics are purely the off-site portion. So this orange window up here is excluded from these calculations. So the 226 hectares in this graphic is everything outside of this orange box up here. So we're showing the contours on site where we have data, but they are excluded from these characteristics. It's off-site only. So we're only looking at everything beyond the boundary, you know, how the plume is behaving purely in the off-site context. So when I play this forward, a couple of the things you're going to notice, some of these wells way out in the really far down gradient, they're hanging wells. And you'll notice we put a blue dot on top of them. That indicates it's a control point. So these wells were always non-detect when they were being sampled. They stopped being sampled at some point, but because they were always non-detect or they were below the base contour, we assumed that same, you know, or we made that assumption that those are still non-detect or still below the base contour. So we put these control point indicators to indicate it's a hanging well, but we're assuming it's a non-detect location. And we don't do that inside the plume. We never do it within the plume, but wells that are far down gradient, far up gradient, that are, you know, probably most likely non-detect, we would continue that assumption. And they stopped being sampled for some reason anyway. So it's a valid assumption. One last thing I want to point out. You guys know that they are on a biennial sampling program for a lot of the wells on the interior of the plume. That means they're sampled every 2 years. So a lot of these wells in the middle that are black, indicating these are all sampled in 2023. In 2024, a lot of those wells were not sampled. So they have this symbol you see over here, it means extrapolated. So they're hanging in a sense. They weren't sampled, but they're part of the program. They just were not sampled in 2024. What we did is we extrapolated 2023's value forward to 2024. That lets us still, you know, do a full plume analysis of the data. So hopefully I won't go through all that explanation again for everything, but want to do it one time. So that's all of the data through 2024 for NDMA. So the next thing we do is we look at the trends in those data. So we have the area on the top. average concentration in the middle, and then the mass indicators on the bottom. And we can trend these data using statistical techniques. We use Mann-Kendall, a very common used in our industry. It's a non-parametric test. It just means into account magnitude or anything with the numerical values or with the, I guess, with the assumptions on normality. It just, it's a straight, is it above or below? Is it increasing or decreasing? It's all that does. We also use a parametric trend test known as linear regression. And a lot of times they agree with each other, and they agree in this case. And so we're just using two different trend tests to look at the, what is the, statistical trend, is it defensible, things like that. So when we look at these trends, they're clearly decreasing. You really don't need a trend test to tell you that. Clearly these data are decreasing over time. However, when we do drop the trend test on there, we do see that it is statistically significant decreasing trends. And we also post the confidence. Every one of these is more than 99% confidence in these trends, indicating that there is a very high degree of confidence that the data truly are decreasing at the site. So a lot of times, we do this for every one of these events, clearly decreasing. Now, in the past, we've only trended the entire data set starting in 93 all the way to the very end. And you can see they are clearly decreasing, and that's what you see over here. And when I zoom into this, one thing we added, because a lot of times when doing trend tests like this, we have that tailing off at the very end. It gets kind of flat. And so it's nice to know in the current data, do we still see decreasing trend if we just look at the most recent data? So we this year, we started doing a new trend test where we look at just the last 10 years of data. So what we're showing you here is a second trend line of 2014 to 2024, representing the last 10 years of analysis. And in fact, when we do this, you can see that second trend line, it's really kind of, zoom in one more level, it's really tucked in there. It's almost identical to the full trend, which is pretty uncommon. Gets back to my point earlier. This data set, it is what it is, but it's a really strong analysis. And you can see even in the last 10 years, it is still statistically significant decreasing trend, indicating that the remediation is still performing quite nicely, regardless of what's going on with all of the things around the system above ground. Where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, the plume itself is continuing to decrease. And that is unequivocal based on the data we collect at the site. And you can see that it is flattening out. That's how all trends behave. Most, especially pump and treat sites, the data get flatter and flatter and flatter. So it's still decreasing, if this makes sense, at a decreasing rate. So as time goes on, that rate of decrease gets less and less and less. And that's the nature. It's just a first order decay, very common. You see that, in any site around the world will have this kind of behavior. However, this site really still shows a strong decreasing trend in the data. So the next thing we do is we look at the center of mass data. So I'm posting all the centers of mass for that full event, or for all of those events on the single graphic here. And this just lets us see generally how the center of mass is behaving. So it's color coded. The darker colors are earlier data, lighter colors are more recent data. And it lets you get a sense of the general track of the center of mass. And you can see over time, it's generally trending back towards the site, indicating a retreating or up gradient trending center of mass. This other chart over here, I'll explain it real fast one time. Notice it has all these vectors on it. So if you can imagine center of mass is at one location for a given sample event, at the next event, it's at a new location, connect those two with an arrow. Mathematically, we represent that as a vector, just a distance and direction. And so it's magnitude and direction. And then we plot all those vectors by tying the tails together. And you see, this is what I call the shotgun pattern, indicating, that the center of mass movement from event to event to event is pretty random. It's scattered across this entire row, this diagram here, indicating it's not always going in the same direction. And this is really a picture of stability, because if it was always going in the same direction, it might indicate that the center of the plume is moving in that direction. In fact, it's not. It's a slow migration up gradient, indicating that we have a lot of mass reduction down gradient, indicating it's cleaning up, it's attenuating. So this is a very strong, stable signature in the center of mass as well. So then the last thing we do And we do this for each one of the plumes, and that's pretty straightforward. What we call a spatial, excuse me, man, a spatial change indicator analysis. And for this, we're comparing each plume map to the baseline plume map. So 93 is on the top left, 94 is in the bottom left. We're going to compare every single plume from that point forward to the baseline. And we do that by subtracting each subsequent plume map from that baseline event. And we get a resultant over here on the right. And what this shows, it's red and blue. There's two different colors. It shows where concentrations increase, indicated by red, relative to where concentrations increase, indicated by blue. The gradational shading gives the relative extent. It's qualitative by nature. It lets you see, when I animate this, areas of increasing concentration relative to areas of decreasing concentration. This is a common phenomenon with plumes. I've looked at thousands of plumes. It's very rare for an entire plume to be all decreasing or all increasing. In fact, parts of a plume decrease and parts of a plume increase, and you see that in the data here. And so what I'll do is I'll animate this, and we can see how this behaves over time. So this, again, qualitative, lets you see areas of increase relative to areas of decrease. There's also a quantitative component to this on the top. We can look at the amount of change in area concentration mass on a percent basis, as well as the magnitude of change. And you see mass increase relative to the mass decrease. And you can see this for every event. So when I animate this, we can see over time, the area starts to shrink. You start to see these areas of dark blue on the periphery. That's where the plume no longer exists. Where it was in 93, you don't see it anymore. And it shrinks all the way down to where it is here. So you see about a 55% reduction in area. Much of this part of the plume, you notice, has decreased, and we see a more than 99% decrease in mass indicator. This is a very uncommon thing. It gets back to my point, what I was saying earlier, that we have a very strong decreasing trend at this site. Very, very good to see that at this particular site. So again, these areas of increase, and a lot of times what we can do is drop in some well charts to help evaluate that. So what I'm doing now is pulling in some well by well charts just to give a little insight into some of these trends. And when we click on this, you can see, for example, 38B right in the core of the plume. If you click on this chart, it zooms into it, and you can see back in 1990, it was 542 micrograms per liter, very high concentration. That's come down quite a bit. All the way to the very end here, 2023 was the last time it was sampled, less than 1. So it's not 0.009 the cleanup, but it's still very, very low. It has decreased substantially over time, continuing to show very good behavior. W3 extraction well in the middle of the plume here. You can see, again, starting from, it was installed in roughly 1999, 98, 99 timeframe. Lots of decrease as well. The well was replaced in 2016, so the green picks up where W3R picks up, and you can see it also continues to decrease to very low numbers. Still not cleaned up, but continues to decrease ever so slightly as time goes on. And then I'll come back to the top here. This area of pink up here, it's kind of around this well, OW187. And it's interesting, it's not really an increase. When we look at the data, if I click on this well, got ahead of myself. Let me say one thing here. On this view, these concentration trend charts are all on the same scale. So you can see them relative to each other. So clearly 187 is much, much lower concentration than you see these concentrations over here that are very, very high. But if I click on that chart, it zooms into that data. That well was not installed till 2018, so it comes in late. So it looks like an increase because back in 93, it didn't exist yet. So it, nothing to something looks like an increase, but in fact, it is starting to come down. It's now less than 0.8, so it's coming down, still above cleanup, but coming down in that particular well. And I've just these are not random. We just did some selected wells here. If I look at 5B, extraction well, again, you can see it was starting around 40 ppb. It's been coming down substantially all the way to the very end here. Continues to decrease. If I zoom in on that, it got less than 0.5 in 2018. Continues to go down. One blip here, but came back down in 2024. So again, and this is the common refrain. There are a lot of decreasing trends here at this site. W6B, when it was installed. Not uncommon for extraction wells, especially when they come online, to start pulling in, concentrations from around that recovery well. And you can see it increased for a period, but then it's been decreasing pretty substantially back to where it started. And hopefully that continues as time goes on. And then this one last area of pink at the very bottom here, around E7, E9, if I click on that, it looks like an increase. And it's increased from where it was. It was non-detect back in 98, but it was as high as 40 at one time, came down, pretty variable, not uncommon also, but you can see it's been pretty low for a lot of years. And I think that's a well that, if I understand, is still on a trial for a pulse pumping to maybe increase some of the recovery in that particular well. But it's still very low. And it's what I would call, and I've used this term before, it's kind of a colloquial term here. It's like a pulling well. And you can see, just looking at the shape of the plume, this way down gradient well, I know it's a municipal well, has served to most likely pull the plume down in that direction. And that's why I know there's been some discussions of maybe, turning that well off or ceasing operation of some level. And I've seen this on a lot of sites. When that happens, you tend to see a retreat where natural conditions take over. So I think that's part of, other discussions, but that's certainly something that I would want to in those discussions on operation of that well, because it does look and act like a pulling well that's pulling the plume towards it. So that's a lot of the NDMA in the upper municipal aquifer. What I'll do is I'll go a little faster now, and I'll drop into the lower and look at NDMA in the lower aquifer. Now on this one, there are fewer wells, so we can zoom in and we can see the well names now. There were too many wells in the upper to get them all listed on the map, but these are all listed here at least. And I'll do the same exact thing. I'm just going to play the video, and you can see now NDMA in the lower municipal aquifer over time, how it's behaving. Makes sense. Probably, E79 is also screened into that lower zone, and it's probably, resulted in some of this migration down here because of that particular well. But you can see it got lighter over time. And when I look at the trends in the data, like I said, very strong decreasing trends in area concentration mass for NDMA in the lower zone as well. And like I said, we dropped in that last trending period for the last 10 years. And again, it almost falls right on top of that overall trend line, still a very strong decreasing trend. And if I zoom in on it, you can see for the last 10 years, NDMA in the lower zone is also continuing to decrease. Notice it's getting flatter. There's a term for this. It's called asymptotic behavior. When it flattens out, it's not there yet. Honestly, this one is still going down. It's not flat, but it's getting flatter as time goes on. And so all that means is it's still decreasing over time, but that rate of decrease is decreasing. So it's like when you stop your car, you see your rate of decrease is the fastest as soon as you hit your brakes, and then as time goes on, your rate of deceleration decreases. So very common pattern we see in the data here. Looking at the center of mass data for NDMA in the lower zone, very similar to the upper. We have that up gradient trending or migration in the center of mass, very scattered picture over here, again, indicating stability with an up gradient migration, indicating this plume is truly attenuating. Like I said, it is the common refrain. The plumes are attenuating because of the actions that have been taken over the years at the site. So here we go with the spatial change indicator. Again, comparing 93 is our base map up here, and we're going to compare each plume map to that baseline. When I hit the start button here, as time goes on, we see some areas of red or pink initially. They start to go down, they go away. And over time, it gets bluer and bluer and bluer, indicating stronger and stronger attenuation and cleanup. Again, we have this dark blue colors on the periphery, indicating those are areas where the plume no longer exists, where it was in 93. It's no longer there in 2024. It's still there in these light blue areas, but lots of decrease, again, in the core of the plume, lots of decrease, a couple areas of increase. And again, we can bring in some well charts to help explore and understand what we're seeing there. So I'll start at the top here, W9. Extraction well comes in pretty high, 100 ppb, has been decreasing over time to where it is in 2024. pretty good picture there. I'll come back to this one at the top here. Right in the core of the plume, 38A was 555, really, really high number back in 1990. And you can see it came down, came up, it's been bouncing around. But again, over several years, all the way through 2023, which is the last time that well was sampled, continues to get lower and lower through time. E7, E9, we've already seen it because it's screened across both zones. So we're showing this data twice, same data we saw before. If I come down to W6, you can see it wasn't installed till 2015 timeframe. It has come up, and that's not uncommon. Like I said, an extraction well tends to collect data or capture concentrations around it towards that well. It has come up a little bit, and it's been pretty stable, you know, in concentration. W5A came in around 1999 at over 100 ppb and has been steadily decreasing over time as well, all the way through 2024. That well was sampled in 2024. And you can see if I zoom in, it's still, even over the last several years, it's still going down, and it's getting lower and lower and lower as time goes on. We have this one area of pink up here, or red, if you will, indicating an increase around CH88B. So 88B was, in fact, no doubt increasing for some period. 88 replacement well came in 2019 timeframe, so we're just overlaying it on top on the same map, pretty much following that same trend. This, I would say, is in fact an increasing trend, something to be evaluated, something to look for, help understand why that is. It's near the site. It makes sense based on its location that we would see that. It is an increasing trend. And one thing I do want to highlight here, this is where well by well trends can send a message versus the whole picture. Clearly, this entire plume is decreasing substantially, even though there are some increasing wells inside it. That's the nature of plumes. That's the nature of data. But you can see this increase is not near what 5 was when it started. So 5A, is down gradient from that well. It should capture everything we see coming from there. I don't see it as a concern really because of that. It's down gradient from that location. So this is in fact one increasing well we see for NDMA. So that's a lot of the NDMA data. And what I'll do now is drop down to the chlorobenzene data.
Sorry, Sebastian's got a question.
Oh, if there's questions, please, by all means, absolutely. I can pause.
Sorry, Joe, just
Yeah.
a couple of questions for you here. One relates to your earlier point about the orange site, the area that was excluded from
Yes.
from study. What was the rationale for not including north and east of the property? What was the rationale for not using?
That's a very good point. Let me play this. So the reason we excluded to begin with, because a lot of those wells starting in 2020, you see almost every well on site goes hanging. So that makes sense. We can't even evaluate on site anymore because those wells aren't being sampled. And because of that, we're going to get some probably artificial ballooning to the east as well. When we don't have control, like even like this well here, if it has concentrations, it's going to push. It's just, that's the nature of kriging, which is the gridding algorithm we're using to evaluate the data. It's going to, without any control over here, it's going to push that direction. In the down gradient direction, we still have control. If I come back, let me back this up. We still have lots of wells that are being sampled right near the boundary. So it makes sense to evaluate this area. But when those wells on site all go hanging right there, we lose all the up gradient control, or up gradient control. And so we made I don't know, Sebastian, honestly. It's a unilateral decision, I guess. We just decided to extend north and extend east and just exclude everything up gradient. I don't know if that satisfies, what your question is, but
Could it be because of the water flow, the groundwater flow? It tends to be from east to west or northeast to southwest.
Yes, this is up gradient. So we've not done any evaluation of potentiometric data. Clearly, it is, like you said, from northeast to southwest. That is the general direction of groundwater flow at the site. So this is an up gradient area. And so, it was decided, I honestly don't know exactly why. It makes sense.
Well,
when I
it's
look at it, it makes sense.
right? I think Lou is on too. So, I mean, we don't have a plume to the north, right? So there's no need to be sampling and evaluating north of the site.
Yeah, I understand the north, Hadley. I was wondering a little bit about the east,
To the
because I
east.
don't think it's
Yeah,
quite as obvious that the east would
again,
be excluded.
Sebastian, it's Lou Almeida for listening in. Yeah, again, to the east, we've done all of the work on Mr. Stroh's property. We provided all that data, and I think we referenced a report. And I think that was resubmitted again to TRAC with all that information. And again, it just lines up with, the conclusion that to the east, we're not seeing any issues. And that also includes Mr. Stroh's well. We haven't seen NDMA in to the east or to the north, which is ultimately the conclusion there.
Okay.
And again, this is backed up by data. And again, I'd refer to that east side report that was requested and provided, that the ministry has reviewed and is satisfied with.
Okay. Fair point. Okay. The second question, though, for Joe, if I could.
Yeah.
There seems to be an anomaly about what is being measured and or the plumes that are being measured and not, because in your upper aquifer, there's no coloration within this on site. But when you get to the lower aquifer, you do have coloring. The plume does go on site. I'm just wondering why there's a distinction between the two here. If you go back, like on your page 43 here with the Indian lower municipal aquifer in 1993 here, you definitely have coloring going over onto site, on the site. And you don't have that with the upper municipal. Why is that? Why do you allow that?
So if let me go back and answer I can answer that. So we have lots of good data on site in the upper, and we could do an evaluation with the on site all the way up until 2020 timeframe. Gosh, sorry guys, I'm clicking too many buttons. I'll forward it to 2020 when all those wells on site right there, they all go hanging, all but one or two on site. And so we lose a lot of, what's going on site in the upper zone. However, in the lower zone, when I'll play this to the end, notice all the wells on site don't go hanging. So here's back it up 1 to 2023. If in our analysis, if that well is black, that means we have data for it. So at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wells all on site have data, there's no reason to blanket or exclude it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Can you define hanging again?
Hanging means we no longer have data for it. It stops being sampled.
I mean, if you go back to 1993, the coloring, the plume does go on site. And that, before that, there was no such thing. I mean, it stopped at the property line. So I'm just wondering why that is.
I guess I'm not following. So this coloring here,
yeah.
We're using so what we're doing is a spatial analysis of data. It doesn't know that it's an aquifer. It's completely blind to anything we tell it. So it's point analysis of data. So every one of these points has a value associated with it. And when you grid that data, the underlying file in here is going to, we're using kriging. That's just the algorithm that we're using. It fills all the points in between. And this is all filled in here too. So this OW14D, clearly it's below 0.009, but these wells over here want to make all of this probably some color of blue. We've excluded these areas based on known, geology at the site. The aquifer doesn't exist in these areas, but it does over here. So we're letting it contour across that and excluding areas in the middle here. So, this, I think what you're saying here, there's color here, but there's no well to tell us there's color there, exactly. If I understand your point. Yeah, so exactly. That's because of the kriging across here. Now, we it's minor, it's not huge. The main thing is everything on this map is consistent event to event to event to event. So what I always say is, our mass estimate might not be the exact mass. It's probably not actually. It's a little off. However, compared from 93 to 94, all those things that add bias go away because it's the same. Geology doesn't change over time, porosity doesn't change over time, anisotropy doesn't change over time. All the things geologic don't change in our time frame, non-geologic time, from year to year to year. Those things stay the same. All we're doing is doing a relative, change in concentration, change in average concentration over time. So it lets us get a sense of, remedial progress. Is the plume truly getting smaller, even though we may not have an exact delineation of the plume? I honestly, I've never thought about this. It's a little bit, it's probably there, but I've not dissected it to that level where, why we could easily just exclude that if we wanted to. And maybe that's what we do next time based on comments. I'm perfectly fine with that. We can draw that same orange boundary on here. I can tell you it probably won't change the outcome or the analysis or the interpretation, but we could certainly exclude that. Honestly, I just haven't thought about why we're letting it contour onto the site. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Yep.
Just a little bit further to that, when you go back to the upper aquifer.
Yes.
And does it skew the data by not including that area? Because we're talking, I'm just looking at your slides here. And the total square hectarage was like 376 approximately.
Yeah.
It's not including that area. So is it changing the numbers based on the fact that that orange area is not being included? Is that part of the 376 hectares?
It is not.
And the average concentration is lower because you're not taking that data in that area?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So this area, and this is, very few people do this, I think. We can easily exclude, we can show you what's going on, but exclude it from analysis. So this area here is, if you draw a line, follow my cursor here, follow the outer boundary of this plume along that orange boundary, that's 376 hectares. We are excluding everything inside that orange box. So if we were to include all of the on-site data, you can sure bet that average concentration number will go up. So our focus is what's the off-site plume behavior doing? And again, this is before my time. I don't know why we're separating on-site versus off-site. That's just the way it's been done. And so our task that I've been given is to evaluate the plume as defined at the property boundary. What is the off-site plume doing? But using all of the available data, because it does inform what's going on, but we're excluding it from the calculations. I hope that makes sense.
Joe, sorry, it's Lou Almeida again. Just clarification. The exclusion of on-site is really because there's a different off-site is dealt differently than on-site. On-site, the goal is containment and continuous pumping until there's another goal that's established or LANXESS decides to do something else. But on-site has a different objective and goal than off-site, at least, as part of the order and under the existing, remedial framework. That's the distinction where, off-site, the goal is, under the existing controller and remedial framework, it's remediation, clean up the aquifers, whereas on-site, the goal is different. The goal is not the same. It's containment of on-site groundwater.
Makes sense.
Yep. So that's why that's why there's a so under the order, under the framework that we have, they are different, and that's why we're dealing with them different. That helps explain why it's been excluded.
To be fair, guys, and I don't want to reconfigure this argument because we've had this one before, Lou, but the east of the property line is also off-site. And to exclude it from analysis is somewhat arbitrary. Even though you say that there's no evidence to support that. That's not conclusive. Okay,
Uh,
so
yeah,
if you want to be consistent, I think you can make an argument that on-site is different and should be treated differently. But if you're going to be off-site, I'm not sure exactly why we're always excluding the east side.
so Joe, or sorry, Sebastian, again, I point you to that report. It's not being excluded. There's just nothing there to consider. I mean, ultimately, that's the answer. It's not been excluded. It's been assessed and evaluated, and the ministry satisfied that there's nothing of significance with respect to groundwater east of the site. So that's the answer. It's not fair to say it's been excluded. It has been evaluated and assessed. And again, I point to that report, and I want to remind everyone that the ministry is satisfied with east, and I don't believe it's accurate to say it's been excluded. It's excluded from this analysis.
Yes, that's right.
Because there's nothing there. That's why it's not in there. We can add it in, but we're just adding in zeros if you want. It won't impact Joe's analysis. It'll just he'll have to run some more calcs, but
we can easily change that orange window to see what I'm drawing here now. We can just make it be that. And that way we're capturing everything outside of that.
Yeah, maybe
polygon.
we should, Joe, for moving forward. Yep.
I'm not suggesting that. I just, I think that's getting to your question though. We're just from this analysis, it's being excluded. But yeah. So, any other questions?
Not seeing any.
Okay.
We can continue this debate for a long time.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll repeat this, but for chlorobenzene. So I'll come back to chlorobenzene here. It's much smaller in extent. You see, it's only about 15 hectares to start relative to the NDMA, so it's much smaller. And you can see, 93, about 1,600 kilograms, pretty high mass. Center of mass is right here. And then what I'll do is I'll let this play because we've already explained how everything works. So, you can see it's pretty far down gradient. And all of the chlorobenzene, you can see it getting less and less. And it's just really just in a few wells at this point above its cleanup level of 100 ppb, or I'm sorry, 80. And so you can see it, a lot of it goes away, or it gets smaller in the plume. And looking at the trends, we can trend it here again from the beginning, from 94 forward in this case. Very strong decreasing trends in the data. And again, when I take the last 10-year period and zoom in on that last 10 years, and you can even look at the last 4 or 5 even, it's still continuing to decrease. But you can see it's getting flatter and flatter, again, indicating that the rate of decrease is getting less as time goes on. And again, I'm focused on the mass down here. The mass is continuing to, or the dissolved mass estimate is continuing to go down. Now, the center of mass for chlorobenzene, you can see that it's got that migration pretty strong actually to the southwest, which is in the direction of groundwater flow. However, it's because that's where the only place the plume exists now. All of the plume up in here where it was is gone. And so when all of this mass up gradient disappears, the center of mass is going to come down to the only well, 1 or 2 wells that have data above the cleanup. And that's why the center of mass is moving. And that becomes more apparent when we look at the spatial change indicator. So again, you can see in 94, the center of mass is right here in the core of this high concentration area. And then when I play the video, you can see in the spatial change, a lot of this area goes dark blue up here, indicating the concentrations have decreased below the cleanup level of 80. And it only exists now off-site in 2 wells, one here and one here. And you can see lots of dark blue where the plume no longer exists. It's just in these 2. And so I can bring in this one well chart. This well was not sampled in 2024. But if I click on it, CH75B, it was pretty low for a long, long time. However, starting in 2018, the last 3 events has come up to about 300 ppb, and that's where it ends. So clearly that well has increased, and I I don't have an explanation or a reason for it. However, it's near a pumping well. So, you know, we have 2 pumping wells through here. I would see that as a simple migration of concentration. It's, you know, like I said, I don't have a strong explanation, but clearly that well has increased, but every other well has decreased, even to the point where there's 97% decrease in mass, 90% decrease in area from 94 in chlorobenzene. So that, again, very strong reduction. We have 1 well here. And if I go to chlorobenzene in the lower zone, notice it's really just in a couple wells, one right by the site and then CH38A down here. So the center of mass is going to be pretty much where most of that concentration center is. And when I play this, you can see W4 comes online, and as you would imagine, it pulls in concentration. And then these wells tend to go up, and then they start going down as time goes on. And so you can see where it ends in 2024. And if I look at the trends, not quite as, you know, steep as we saw in those other trend lines, but still very high statistical confidence in a decreasing trend. And if I come back to the last 10 years and all of these as well, even in the last 10 years, it's still decreasing. Even the last 3 you can see is still decreasing in the trend in the mass of the chlorobenzene. So again, very strong data. It's really strong to see what's going on here. Whoops, too far. The center of mass for the lower zone chlorobenzene, pretty, you know, you saw that in the data. It's just coming back to those few concentrations near the site. Pretty strong up gradient, northeast trending center of mass. And if we do the spatial change indicator, again, 94, this is what the plume looked like. I'll compare every event to the 94 event. Blue indicates attenuation or decrease. Red indicates an increase. It almost looks like it just swapped positions when you look at it. So where it was in 94 is no longer there. Where it exists today is just in these areas, and there are 5 wells in here, none of which was sampled in 2024. However, we can look at those data. And if I come down to, for example, CH43D, you know, it has come up to over 300, but has been starting to come down and appears to be on a downward trend. Even though it's increased from where it was in 94, it appears to be decreasing in the most recent years. If I come up to 70D, again, it was not installed yet in 1994, so it looks like an increase. However, from its high in 2006 of 2000, it's been steadily decreasing through 2024 as well, or 2023. And then if I keep going here, OW 171 wasn't installed yet in 94, so it looks like an increase because it shows up in the newest map. It wasn't there in the original map. However, it also appears to be decreasing in its data. So even though these are all red, indicating it's increased from the baseline, they're decreasing, at least these 3 are. If we come down to CH69A, you can see since 2002, it has in fact come up to about 300 again, 350, but in the last couple events, it has come down to about 150. So it doesn't appear to be continuing to increase. And then we'll come over to 68A, which is right near W5A. And that well does appear to be on an increasing trend, has increased from non-detect to about 250. Not uncommon, it's right near an extraction well. So W5A is an extraction well right there. And you can see 5A was going up over time. In about 2000, it peaked at just over 200 ppb, but has since started to come down through 2024, continuing to come down. I would expect we'll see that similar pattern in 68A as well. And then we have this one right near the site, OW61, has been non-detect for a long, long time. And then I don't know why, in 2023, it had a result of above 600 ppb. So one hit, a trend does not make. So I can't really assess what's going on temporally here. That's something that clearly needs to be understood, and will be sampled again and go from there.
Okay, thanks, Ryan.
Ryan.
Yeah, hi, Joe. I just had a question about the lower one, you know how you were talking about how it's almost swapped positions?
Yes.
And so like over time, if the program, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the program, if it's pulling that material towards like wouldn't the material that's, sort of like to the west kind of move through that eastern portion and explain why, or no? It's just being pulled out at multiple sites.
I think I understand what you're saying. So if I
Yeah,
play
so
this
like it's
again,
it's
yeah,
yeah, here it's all
it's
red, and then
migrating.
the
Yeah,
time, yeah.
it's being pulled over there.
Yeah, so then like is that what's causing those levels in these other wells to kind of go up over time and
Yes,
then drop
that's a
back?
very good, that is a plausible explanation,
Okay.
because it is pulling in material or mass from these areas. These wells come online and we see them go up. And actually, if we look at, like, for example, 5A, it was going up for a period, but then it's starting to go down. So
Yeah,
it very well could be. You're exactly right. So this well, 68 was coming up towards 5, and it's starting to go down now too.
yeah, it's almost like it's pulling that
Yes,
thing
yes, it's a very plausible explanation.
east,
Yes,
and then
yes,
that's why these
yes,
eastern
yes.
wells are going up. Yeah, okay.
That's exactly
Just want
right.
to make sure.
Yeah, no, that it is, and it's in the right direction, right back towards the site.
Great.
It does follow reason why we see that. So
Yeah.
yes, very very good observation. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's it. So that's everything that I have to show, and that's what's in the annual report, and that serves as a basis, for our, assessment of remedial measures at the site. That, what's been going on, since the offsite collection and treatment system started in 1998 timeframe. No, it has not cleaned it to, the cleanup level. However, it has done a tremendous job at lowering concentrations in the offsite aquifers. No doubt. You can see it in the data. It's a pretty unequivocal case that you have significant, reductions and attenuation in the offsite plume. So that was what's in the AMR, and that's what we see in the data. So I'll pause with that.
Thank you, Joe.
Absolutely.
That's helpful. I always like the visuals. Carl?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I did have a question. So there
Yeah.
was that one very high concentration of chlorobenzene that's out of nowhere. Has there been any thought put to why that might have happened? And a follow-up sampling event to confirm
61.
that?
Yeah, I may defer to Hadley or Lou on that
Yeah,
one.
I think it's similar to what Alan presented at one of the most recent meetings, right? I don't think we know why this one is happening. I think maybe I did make a note, and Lou, you might want to make the same note, that we probably should resample it, see if we can get a little more data from that one to understand what's going on.
Yeah, I can confirm that this well is going to be resampled. Obviously, things are moving, through this area. As Joe has indicated, it seems to follow the pumping regime that we have. Like if anything was there and is moving towards our extraction point, this fits that. But I guess we're missing the initial piece of data as that would explain where this came from.
Yeah.
It fits with the pumping regime and the aquifer analysis that Joe's doing. We just don't know where this started off, where it came from, but it is coming towards our extraction point. And I think the backstop for us doesn't mean that the question doesn't need to be answered. It will eventually be captured by the extraction well, and
yeah,
which is the most important point. But again, it's a valid question and needs to be looked at.
Yeah, and I'll just throw anecdotally. I know how you've seen this at a lot of sites. You get a seemingly anomalous value randomly like this. Invariably, time will tell what the true condition is. So I'll leave it at that. But it's not uncommon to see this at sites.
Do we know what date
It could
that
have
was
been
sent?
speck of sediment, right? That the
Yeah,
lab
yeah,
analyzed,
no,
right? And
there's a
sometimes
lot
it's
of
arbitrary,
possibilities.
right?
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
ton of possibilities, and I wouldn't get excited until it's been confirmed
A
that
true
it's an
trend.
issue.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Agreed. I'm sorry. I think I cut somebody off.
That's okay, I just wanted to know what the date of that sample was. And if we've seen
2023.
that, why would they have not resampled sooner than April 2025?
It's still being contained by the pumping, so there's no reason. You know, this even it's an anomaly, but there's no movement or extent that's not being captured by our remediation system. We will add it for sure.
It had the
Resample.
it's on the list to get sampled. Again, just so folks understand, we only do because this is 30 years on, and we've been sampling wells for 3 decades now. We're down to sampling twice a year at all at select locations. And yeah, so we'll work on this. I know this is a question that will be addressed in the future, and we want to figure this out. But again, the fallback position for us is that will be dealt with the extraction and treatment system. But yeah, we'll look into providing more information as to where this likely originated, and how it got there. But we, without a well between here and where it originated, we're kind of left in the dark at this point in time.
Sebastian.
This is probably an impossible question to answer, but let me just pose it anyway. The trends are wonderfully going down, they're decreasing both for MDNA and for chlorobenzene. Is there any way of determining how much of that decrease was due to the CTS system? And how much was due to natural attenuation? Is there any way of breaking that down? Or is that the impossible question?
I think more to the latter there. Yeah, that's a hard to figure that out. Clearly, both are in play. I think. Well, clearly you're recovering mass, so the engineered system is doing probably a lion's share of that, but there's always some level of intrinsic attenuation as well. It's probably there, but it's really hard to do it. The only way, and I'm not suggesting this, the only way to assess that is to turn the system off and see what the natural conditions do. So
yeah.
Yep.
And we've 30 years and yeah.
We've done that. We did that at another LANXESS site,
Well,
and
we are
worked,
going to do it this summer. We plan to shut it down for a few months. Not the southernmost well, not PW7, but no, you're right. Both are in play. The chlorobenzene, I think, especially could be attenuating more naturally than the NDMA necessarily.
Yeah.
The way it with the anaerobic aquifer. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to I think Joe's right. I mean, when we look at attenuation in a deep aquifer where there's not a lot of nutrient present or almost no nutrient, there's no oxygen. We don't, doesn't mean it isn't happening. It just, the conditions for, attenuation to be a significant, mechanism or option or that they're low. But without looking at it more, Sebastian, and doing studies and doing calculations, it's difficult to say at this point.
Yeah.
I think there's another question, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, my thinking, correct me if I'm wrong, is natural attenuations tend not to be up gradient, right? Like, or, there might be some degradation, microbial degradation, but this trend of movement up gradient would seem to indicate that the system is doing, again, like Joe was saying, the lion's share of it, right? Like, because natural attenuation, I don't think you would either see it spreading or, the concentrations just dropping, not moving like it's moving. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what yeah.
You're right. I do think that, when you're stressing aquifer with large scale pumping like they're doing, you're going to see most of that from, the pumping, and you're clearly recovering a lot of mass. So it's, like I said, it's just hard to tell how much, microbial you're getting without turning it off and see.
Thanks, Joe. I
Yeah.
have a question. It's not really for you, I don't think, because you're just sort of showing us what's happening, but it's question or a comment, and that is going forward, and I'm looking many years down the road, if we want to start using the water, the aquifer again for consumption or otherwise. I think from the LANXESS point of view, like our job is off-site, your job is on-site, but if we want to be able to use the aquifer, what do you need to do on-site so that we don't start pulling that back? And that's not a question to have an answer tonight, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I think about that a lot because, we want to return it to service. We want to understand what that means. And right, we don't want it to be a continually source to re-pollute the aquifer.
Hadley, if I can just jump in, that was Sandy's question, I think, if I heard.
Yes.
Again, I just want to point to the control order, which currently requires LANXESS to capture and contain all groundwater on site. So that's a requirement. That's something that has to happen. And obviously, if parts of the offsite aquifer are going to be pumped, that's going to be something that has to be looked at and maintained, I think, in the future. And I know that Hadley wants to start working on starting to answer that question. I think we're looking at E7. We're looking to talk to a municipality about, sorry, not E7, E10, and we're going to start looking at that. Hadley's asked us to do that. So.
Okay, good. Thanks. I'm glad it's on your radar.
Just to clarify, Lou, E10, is that the one south of the site or south of the town?
South of the town, up that ridge, right?
Okay, I think I know where that is. Okay, yeah.
South of the A&W as you go towards
South
St. Jacobs. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
There's a road there. I forget the name of the road.
Scotch
line.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. There's nothing else for Joe. Thanks again for coming in and running your model for us.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is overview of planned 2025 work and new activities. I think that we may have covered that, but Hadley, if you've got anything else.
Sure. There's a slide in the agenda that Stacy put together. It has everything that we're continuing to do. So a lot of it's what we have to do, right, by the control order, and then also groundwater and the different sampling that we're planning. I don't really want to spit out and discuss every item. Are there questions on it or anything that might need clarification?
Yes, the only question I would have, is there any aspect of the have tos or the plan tos that you feel have a pinch point or a pain point in terms of getting done, or at this point?
Not on this slide, no.
Okay.
And not with, and the next slide, we can talk maybe more about the, overall picture where things are going. But these are requirements. Lou, do you see anything that you might have concerns with?
No, this is regular business operation that we have to do, that need to be done, and are just part of normal day-to-day operations. So.
Yeah, and so like, downtimes and contractor availability and stuff shouldn't affect any of these, right?
Well, we are working because we're having so much trouble with contractor availability. I've scheduled it instead of being reactive when there's an issue, we're being proactive and we're looking at the different wells and the different pumps and putting them on a maintenance schedule like you would do for your car, right? We're not waiting for them to break. We're doing more routine maintenance to try to keep them operational. And so hopefully that will also, I mean, this is the year to test it, but hopefully that means because we have the contractors coming and scheduled and not saying, oh no, we need you now, we'll be able to get their attention a little bit better. There are still things that can happen, right? Our car could break, but we're trying to be more proactive than reactive.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. No, I acknowledge that problem. I hope this helps. I hope we get there. And we got lots of lamps, so that was another big thing. We did have supply chain issues still. I know COVID's long over, or mostly over, but there are still some getting the UV lamps has been very problematic, but we had a large delivery and that should help us too, because we're trying to make sure we have plenty of parts on the shelf so we don't have to wait for things. And that was one that was giving us some grief.
Good idea, Sebastian.
Thank you. Hadley, all the items that you've listed here are basically operational questions or issues. Is there something of a strategic nature that you are going to be undertaking this year? I'd just like to remind you that, of course, that 2028 is looming and something drastic has to change. So I'm wondering if there are some longer term issues being contemplated.
Sure, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And it's these studies that we've been talking about, right? So we did the Ricker analysis. That's what Joe just presented. The next three are basically what do we need? We need to collect some more data. We need to look at the site differently in order to help support what will be we'll be doing something different for the next 2028 control order. We need data. So this is 2025 is my year to collect data from the offsite plume in order to support the evaluations to get to the 2028 control order. So we're doing the steady state condition test. That's where we shut down the interior wells that we've discussed. We let it come back up, not be forced pumping and stress like Joe talked about with the aquifer, but instead more of a natural type condition to understand what are our constituents, what is the mass, what are our material that's sorbed into the soil, and how is it reacting to the water when it comes back up to that steady state. We need to understand that. And then we're also doing the bench scale study in order to take the water from the more natural state and test it at the laboratory and understand, can we put additives in it? Like the what you've suggested before, that study in Indianapolis. Gosh, that company is escaping me right now. And what we did with the study in 2013, where we put in the ORC, the oxygen releasing compound, Regenesis. Regenesis makes these, they put them in different sites, different environments. Can we add Regenesis to our groundwater? Will it help us? Can we add other alternatives to the groundwater? Will it help us? Can we get it oxygenated? Which is really hard because this is a huge plume. It will be hard to get, like, we've talked about adding propane throughout the neighborhood is not necessarily something we want to do to try to get it into an oxygenated state or something. But the bench scale will be doing this in a laboratory environment to understand, will it help us in the field? And then the groundwater remedial technology evaluation, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's just the report of different alternatives and ideas for enhancing remediation of the aquifer that was started in, I think, 2017, 2018, and we finalized it and submitted it to the ministry. It had been draft this whole time. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. You're
I was just going to say the last version was to take a final look and update with anything that had sort of come to light since 2017. But it was finalized and circulated.
So I anticipate once we do these studies over the summer, we should be looking at that evaluation again and saying, now that we have this new data, are those alternatives still valid? Are there other alternatives that we have identified? What else should we be talking about? So I think we'll be doing this again next fall to look at the evaluations, because Sebastian, I understand the clock, right? This is my job. This means a lot to me. I want to try to help and get it right and get there and meet the deadlines, right? That's what I'm beholden to do.
Very much appreciated. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Are there any other questions on these studies?
And I can keep talking through the rest of the points too. So well, we talked about the fish tissue study. The ministry is providing some comments. We do still think that's on track for the summer. Everything I've talked about so far is still on track for the summer. Now I'm going to talk about a change in direction a little bit, and that's still on the risk assessment. So we submitted a plan to sample. Stantec supported it, submitted the additional sediment and creek baked soil sampling. We sent that to the ministry. I can't remember when, I think earlier this year. And they have comments, and the comments are still really going back to the risk assessment and the same comments that we've been seeing. And we're a little bit of an impasse, and it's been really difficult for me as a project manager to figure out how to move forward on this and continue to do the right thing. And the ministry sent a few examples of risk assessments on high profile sites that they were happy with, that they thought were strong work products. And so I looked at those and I found something that had a common denominator across them. Several of them had the same author. And it's somebody that I knew, that I worked with in the early 2000s when I was doing field sampling in creeks and sediment and banks. And her name is Miranda Henning. She was with Arcadis and then went to Environ, Ramble, and now she's with a company called Integral. So I've talked with the ministry on this with Jason. We've had a lot of discussions and what's the right thing. And we're switching, not quite switching companies again, but I'm getting her input. I'm asking her to look at everything we've done, the risk assessment protocol, which is what the risk assessment was built off of, our work plan for the additional soil sampling, and the ministry's comments, and do a peer evaluation and really help us to understand what are her thoughts, right? Like, are we missing things? Where do we need to continue to resample? What are our data quality objectives for this? How can we address the ministry's comments and questions better than we have, frankly? So that's just starting. I'm getting her under contract. I think it will be about an at least 6-week evaluation for her. It's a lot of information. It's but we want to give her time to get it and to get it right and review everything. So with that being said, I don't quite know if I'll be doing the sediment and creek bank resampling this year still, because, and that means also any kind of targeted cleanup or removal, because I still really want to get the risk assessment approved and in a state that the agency agrees with our what we're suggesting as well, right? Our recommendations and so forth, before I do anything else, because I don't want to cause, I've done work in creeks, I've done cleanups inside of a creek, and it's quite disruptive. You remove trees, you remove habitat, you remove vegetation. I don't want to do that in the wrong area, right? So I think I think we're moving in the right direction, but it again takes more time on this one. So I can't say for certainty if we'd be doing the sediment and creek bake sampling this year. I want her to be able to look at it, provide what she thinks we should be doing on the sediment and the sampling, and then we'd have to go back to the agency to gain their approval. Any questions? I know that was a lot.
I'm not seeing any. Susan, and yeah, I am seeing. Okay, Linda.
It's not really a question, but no, I think that's just my own view, and I think in having kind of an outside, because there's been so much back and forth on the risk assessment. I know the ministry and our own comments. So to have someone else take a look at it, fresh eyes, I think that's great. So thanks for that, Hadley.
Yep, thank you. I appreciate the support. And you bring up a good point with your comments. I need to make sure I get those to Miranda too.
Susan?
Yes, Hadley, I'm glad to hear that that's happening as well. That is sign of some progress here. So is it your sense that the issues that the agency, the ministry are having with what is done so far is that is with the data, that you don't have enough data or you don't have it in the right places, or is it something else?
I don't know if I feel willing to comment on that right yet. Jason, do you have thoughts? I don't want to put you on the spot.
I assume that type of question is going to be better addressed once LANXESS gets through this 6+ week evaluation with Miranda.
Okay.
So it's kind of hard to say right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. And
I guess with that in mind, is it reasonable to expect maybe an update for our June TRAC meeting? Like,
I don't know if we'll have exactly recommendations, but in December, I said, keep asking me about the risk assessment because I want to keep talking about it. So we will for sure have an update. We'll know what she's saying. We'll know more. I don't know what we'll know, but we'll know more. Yep.
Great. Okay. Sounds good.
And then the last item is, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I was
the updated conceptual site model. I want to speak to that a little bit too. So Jesse Wright is with Arcadis. He's the one who he finally got into Canada. He saw the site the morning of the scheduled site visit last week that we had to cancel. So we saw it right before the snow fell. So he is working on that. I've asked him if he would be able to present at the June meeting. I know that the ministry's also, we hope to talk about the process for the ECA, for the control order. So hopefully there'll be time for him to talk about his findings on the conceptual site model at that time as well. He is working on something. I've seen some of what he's put together. And also from my technical team, right, it's a bit of a hybrid. It's not just GHD. I am bringing people in that I've worked with in the past too. Jesse's one of those. And the other person is Cullen Flanders, who some of you heard speak at the September technical meeting. And he was with GHD and now he's just moved to Arcadis, and he used to work for Arcadis for a long time too. So he'll be part of the team as well. And he's looking at all the work that we're doing over the summer and the different alternatives for remediation and that evaluation. And that's probably something he'll be able to talk to at one of the meetings in the fall.
Thank you. Anything on that? Hey. Thanks, Hadley, for that and for going at these in a bit of a new way and looking at things in a bit of a new way, getting some extra eyes on it. I think that's.
I'll tell you what I hate to hear is this is how we've always done it, right? My whole career, I've heard that a lot, and if you tell me that, I will turn and run the other way. so I don't know what the solution will be, but hopefully we'll get going, right?
Thank you. Yeah, we appreciate that. Targeted hotspot removal update.
So that was answered there in the discussion. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And I think we talked about everything on this slide.
Yeah.
Eric.
This is going forward past this presentation, but can you give me an estimate? How much water do we pump out of the aquifer under our current pump and treat method?
It's still decades.
On an annual basis, compared to what the region may or may want to pump out if it was drinking water standards in 10 years, or if we're able to start wells 3-4 miles southwest of town. Trying to figure out how much pressure there is on the aquifer for pumping and treating versus when can we start using different parts of it.
That's a hard one to answer. Let's talk after this year. Let's still get some more data and see where we are. But I mean, the reality is we could pump the water now, but then the treatment would be at the region, right? That they would be treating it so it would be safe for drinking water. It wouldn't. Mhm.
Where I was trying to go with that is, how much do we have to pump and treat to contain it?
Right.
And we'll also be pumping out at a different location that's outside the plume. I know there's politics involved in that and social acceptability, but over time, we have to use this resource. I'm trying to understand the order of magnitude on pump and treat wasting the water versus can we salvage different parts of the aquifer?
You're right. My eye is on that as well. And is there something that we can do? And I'm glad the region, I don't know if Carl's at the meeting. I'm not sure
He's
if I
here
saw
now.
him.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm here.
I'm not sure if there's something like, or can we just like we have containment at the site? Can we have containment within the town in order to let the region use that well? We don't know yet. That's still part of the analysis that we need to keep working on.
Just looking from the from the monthly progress monitoring reports, the combined pumping rate of the offsite wells is approximately 55 liters per second. So that's the offsite current remediation amount, plus or minus little bits, you know, it can vary. But that's what it averages and running. So you'd have to ask the region, or that's part of the testing that will have to come up. And because they're geographically separate, one being further north and one being further south, just because there's 55 coming out of one area doesn't mean you can't take more or less from the other area, because it's not a one-to-one. There's a combined area of impact potentially, but it's not going to be a complete. You can't have 55 because we've got it, and so therefore you have to have it. So it's still to be determined based on physical testing. You can't just simply do a calculation of one versus the other.
Is there an order of magnitude, like how much water does a Myra use?
I think it's in that range of 30 to 50.
But it also depends on what the well can produce. And the former well at E10 can only produce up to about on the order of 75 liters a second. So those are two numbers you could use, but they don't really mean anything because pumping 75 liters a second out of E10, you know, might have an impact, might start to draw water from some of the edge of the containment area, which would offset or, you know, would not be the right outcome because it would interfere with the remediation. So there's a balance in there somewhere.
It's about 100 versus one.
They're still pumping out a large amount from each of the different systems there, if they could operate together.
Yeah, it's a very delicate balance, and it could change through time too. If the locations of some of these extraction wells change, if they added a new one somewhere else that's maybe closer to the center of mass of the existing plume, there's a lot of different kind of variables that could change the rates that those wells need to extract in order to contain the plume.
But I think maybe part of the essence of your question is, are we pumping too much that we couldn't even use the rest of the aquifer? Right. And I think the answer is no.
No. Yeah, that's important to know.
Anyone else? Okay, remediation framework and reporting update. We covered that as well. All right, I'm on to other business. Is there anything else that anyone wants to talk about tonight?
Actually, can I
Yeah.
drag us back?
Yes.
To that? Hadley, you did have a slide on 2025 planned work reporting. And I don't think that slide came up. And I had a question on the very last one, E10 pumping test result. What is that? Who's
We actually probably didn't want to put that in, and that's my mistake. So this is one that I don't have 100% control over. I've talked to Carl about it, and it's exactly what you guys are discussing, right? So I would like to try to do a pumping test on E10, the one out by Scotch, what is it? Scotch
line.
Line Road. To try to see what happens, right? Like how much can you pump from it? And we have our well network. We would put data loggers in it that would tell us if they're dropping when that's being pumped, to understand how much influence that well would have on our network, right? And does it move the plume? Does it move it to the south? If that's the case, we don't want that. But to understand the dynamics between the two. You have a good eye.
I'm predisposed to look at number regional waters, regional Waterloo water well information, so.
Right, but I can't do
like that-
anything with that without their approval. And we have a draft of the plan, and with the annual monitoring report, I haven't gotten back to look at that. I had some changes that I wanted made. So we do want to send it to the region, but we may not be able to do it, right? That you guys may decide it's not something that we want. I don't know. So that's why I didn't mean to put it out for the public yet, because I'm not the decision maker on that one.
Fair enough. Thank you.
And item
You look quizzical. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I don't have a strong sense either way of whether there's an appetite to do that test. So it would have to be further discussions.
Yep, understood. And I didn't mean to, yeah, like I said, I didn't mean to have that in there. I'm sorry.
Sebastian.
Yeah, on other business, Hadley mentioned that she's going to get a group of experts over the summer and talking about how we can proceed. What about our own technical specialists? Are they going to be involved in this at all?
certainly could be.
Yes, yes,
Would
absolutely.
welcome the opportunity.
I mean, I think the technical meeting we had in September was very helpful. I anticipate doing more of those. And then also as we move through the control order and that, the public will have to be able to comment as well.
Just item 6 is a standard item that Chair Nathan likes to have them on there. But I don't think we have any specifics to discuss at this time. It was if something came up out of the other items.
Okay, so we're
We're okay with one. Yeah.
Okay. There's some correspondence here. Does anyone want to talk about any of those pieces? No? Okay. Our next meeting is June 19th. And I guess if there is nothing else, I would take a motion to adjourn.
I would just say to complete the doodle poll, right? So we can hopefully do a site visit as well.
Yes, April 16th.
And hope for better weather.
It's looking like April 30th.
I also just want to just double check, is the preliminary agenda items for that meeting in June? I think based on tonight's discussion, we're good to go with where we're at on that. But maybe Hadley, you could take a look at what we had sort of come up with back in December. And just let us know, Stacy and myself know if you think we're on track for those agenda items.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Motion to adjourn. Brian and Eric Hodgmans. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Good meeting. Thanks.
Yep. Have a good night. Thanks, everybody.